Good.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for LAMCS training. I apologize for the delay. I had a little bit of technical issues. Today, we've got our very popular Mr. Kalunga, who's an agronomist and who works at Mount Makulu for the Zambia Agriculture Research Institute. Mr. Kalunga has given us training before and it was very useful. So I hope all of you have got pen and paper and are ready to make as many notes as you can. Please feel free to take his contact details. They're showing on the first screen there. Mr. Kalunga will be happy to come and visit and advise you. So without delaying you any further, I will hand you over to Mr. Kalunga. But let me say, as we do the training, please give us your questions in the chat, and then I will give your questions to Mr. Kalunga and he'll answer all your questions. If you are not on Gmail, you will be unable to give notes in the chat. Not to worry, you can send your messages via WhatsApp. I've got my WhatsApp here and my Telegram, and I will still give your questions to Mr. Kalunga. So Mr. Kalunga, thank you so much for joining us today for our LAMCS training, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Evening to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So today's presentation is going to be on sustainable agriculture, which actually has a lot of topics in it. So there are my details, like Mrs. Kalinda has mentioned. Everything is there, my contact details are there, and where I work. I think without wasting much of the time, I would allow us to go to the table of content, please. Next slide. So what we have here is the introduction, sustainable agriculture, conservation agriculture, tillage systems, mulching, cover crops, and conclusion. So we're going to go through all those things. Please, like she's mentioned, feel free to ask questions and let's participate in everything that we're going to discuss today. Second slide. Thank you very much. It's introduction. You know, farming can be done by anyone at any time, but the most important thing that we have to bear in mind is that how you do it has got repercussions in the long run. It can be positive or negative impacts on your environment. And also looking at the environmental degradation, which has actually led to climate change. You know, people with small farms, they always wanted to do the deforestation, and because of the industrialization as well, this has actually led to a lot of changes in the climate. Also, due to a scarcity of land, we know that not everyone is able to have massive land or a big chunk of land. So what we want is, for as long as you've got a small piece of land, you're able to at least produce something and make your farm look very unique. You know, scarcity of land and climate change has actually led to the birth of sustainable agriculture. Of course, we all know that to sustain, we're trying to hold or to maintain something for a longer period. And also knowing that agriculture at times is a art, you know. You need to, there are times people have got thoughts of beautifying the farm, which is the art, of course, and it couples with itself with the science, where we incorporate the technologies that have been developed by agriculture scientists. So you bring in the way you want to beautify your farm and the science that has been researched on, you bring that together. That is what we call in agriculture, which is the art and science of cultivating the soil, growing crops, and of course, raising livestock. Next slide. So, having mentioned about sustainable agriculture, which is the way of practicing agriculture, which seeks to optimize skills. We're trying to look at, you've got the skills, but you're trying to modify them by also involving the technologies that have been generated to achieve long-term stability of agriculture enterprise. For instance, most of people have got different things happening at their farm. You can have a fish pond, and you're also doing livestock, let's say pig production, and also you've got a chunk of land where you're doing your vegetable production. So what I was trying to say is, since you've got different enterprises within your farm, so you're getting the manure from the pigs, and you're putting that manure in your garden, and you're also putting that manure in your fish pond. So there is that evolving of the enterprise within the farming unit. So of course, we're also looking at the environmental protection. You know, when you've got sustainable agriculture, it's looking at also at the environmental protection, by at least promoting afforestation and also not destroying the environment while we're staying. Overusing of chemicals, that is something that sustainable agriculture discourages. You can use chemicals, but at a minimal rate, not of overusing of chemicals. And also consumer safety. You know, these chemicals are hazardous to human health. So in as much as you're trying to practice conservation agriculture or sustainable agriculture, we're basically trying to look at how workers at the farm, how people are supposed to be looked after in terms of human safety, health and safety, sorry. Where when they're using chemicals, we need to make sure that instructions and how they're supposed to use them, everything is followed. So now, all these things in sustainable agriculture can be achieved by, of course, taking into account certain management practices. So if you want to practice sustainable agriculture, you're going to look at the hybrids and varieties. So you choose the varieties that are high yielding. The hybrids, of course, we don't want to use the local breeds because of the vigor, how much they give you at the end of the day. If you're looking at livestock, we're also looking at which breeding stock do you want to have? How many cows do you want to have? How many pigs do you want to have? You look at the quality of that particular breeding stock, which will actually give you a lot of piglets at the end of the day. And also management strategies that we can use in sustainable agriculture is, of course, soil conserving cultural practices. You know, soil is a backbone of agriculture. So we need to make sure that we select certain cultural practices that will help us conserve it, because if you destroy the soil, then it means everything is not going to work out according to your plans. Of course, we've got other things like soil fertility programs, where you have to look at what programs, what farming systems am I going to use at my farm so that I can still maintain my fertility levels of the soils. So all those things are something that you need to also to look into as a management. Pest management programs, you know, pests are very a problem to crops and also to animals. So what we're trying to look at is what other things can we bring in that will not harm the environment. But of course, what we want at the end of the day is to maintain a good yields and also to maintain our farms to be productive. But then by doing that, we want to have pest management programs that will not harm the entire farm block. Next page. Thank you. So now, conservation agriculture is under sustainable agriculture. So we're trying to conserve, and the agriculture is coming in the way. So it's an agriculture practice which seeks to optimize skills and technologies to achieve long-term stability. And agriculture, enterprise, environmental protection, and consumer safety. So this conservation agriculture is governed by 3 principles, which we're going to expand as we go down. So the first principle is to do the minimum soil disturbance. You don't disturb the soils massively or extensively, but then you just disturb it minimally so that you don't destroy the soil structure. And also you've got what we're calling permanent organic soil cover, or using the cover crops, where you have to make sure that your soils are well covered so that you maintain or you regulate the temperatures within the soils. And the last one is crop rotation. Of course, with crop rotation, you have to make sure that in your rotation program, you've got the incorporation of legumes that are going to help in fixing the depleted nitrogen in the soils. Next page. Thank you. So we've talked of the minimum soil disturbance. Remember, the soil is going to be disturbed. By disturbing the soils, we're looking at the tillage. So now we're going to discuss the tillage systems. So we know tillage is just the mechanical modification of the soil structure. You're trying to break the soils. You're trying to reduce the rocks so that you smoothen the area where you want to plant something. So if you can see in the first, I've got 3 diagrams here. The first diagram, which is tillage can prepare a favorable seedbed. When you look at the top there, you find that this particular field has got a lot of rocks on top. And when you go in and you try to plant anything, you find that the plant will be able to struggle to emerge from the soil to the surface. So what we want is, we want to break all these rocks, mechanical modification. We want to modify the soil structure of that particular field so that we can have a smooth seedbed for proper germination of the crops that you intend to plant. So the second one, we've looked at intensive tillage. So when you look at intensive tillage, you've tilled your soils and you've planted. But when you look down there after 20 centimeters, the depth where you plow, if you're using a plow, you find that you create what we call a plow pan. What does this mean? It means, depending on what you've planted, if the root system of that particular crop or plant is able to go up to 50 or 40 centimeters, it means it cannot go there because you've created that plow pan by the mechanical modification that you are trying to use. The implements that you use during mechanical modification of the soil structure. So if you intensively till your soils, you're going to have that layer which is going to be very hard. So that is going to prevent the roots to go down. So what happens is that at that particular time, as the plant is growing, it will start struggling. Therefore, at the end of the day, it will just die. So now, when you look at the other one, long-term no-till, you know, if you don't till your soils for a long time, what you're creating there is the environment already for that particular soil is going to be very good, because down there are a lot of microorganisms that are making, that are helping in loosening the soils, and also that are helping in nutrient recycling. So when you look at the network of the biopores, so you find that as you try to plant something there, the network of the roots will be diverse. Therefore, the plant, as it keeps growing, it will grow vigorously and it will give you the best output at the end of the day. Second slide. So remember, this tillage system has got the positive and of course, and the negative part. So when we look at the tillage system, we're basically looking at how the soils will respond when you try to modify them. So on the positive side, the soil condition, you're modifying the soil condition so that you have a proper and smooth seedbed. If you're planting avocados, you're trying to make a station that is going to allow for proper germination or proper growth of that avocado plant. But then if you just plant without making a proper planting basin, then it means the plant might struggle in the long run. So the modification of soil structure favors the agronomic process, such as soil seed contact. We want the soil and the seed to be in contact. Also, we want the water, because we're trying to change the soil condition. So what we want the soil to be in contact with the seed, and also we want, when we do our irrigation in the avocado plantation, we want the water to be able to infiltrate into the soil nicely. And of course, we want the soils at least to be warm enough for a lot of chemical processes to take place. So as also we try to modify the soils by tilling it, there are certain things that is advantageous, because we're looking at the weed and pest suppression. You know, when you're tilling your soils, it's like you're trying to cut the root system of the weeds. So at that particular time, you're trying to destroy the weeds. And also, because the pests at times, they might be in one place, by tilling the soil, you're also destroying the pest life cycle by exposing them to the sunlight, because when they are just within the soils, you find that they become more comfortable and the environment there is very favorable. Therefore, the pest infestation is very high. So by tilling, you destroy that cycle. Then we're looking at residue management. You know, in most cases, when you've got land, you find that land will have a lot of different residues. For instance, you find that someone had planted maize, and the maize stovers will be all over there, or probably someone had planted soybeans. So what you want is, you want to move, as you are tilling, you're moving those maize stovers that are heaped in one area, so that they're evenly distributed. So that you maintain and promote soil cover within that particular area. As you till, the other advantage of tilling is also helping you to do the placement of fertilizers or redistribution of substances such as fertilizers and manures and seeds. You know, when you till your land, what you're actually doing is you're creating an environment where when you come in your field, you want to do the fertilizer application, it becomes very easy, because everything is smooth and you've made your planting basins in a very aligned way. So even as you do the fertilizer distribution, it becomes easier. Manure, and also when you're trying to plant, everything becomes easy. So you create that proper environment for the plant. The other function is, the other advantage is that segregation. You know, the farm will never be smooth. So a farm will have areas where there are rocks. We'll have areas where we've got what we call the clouds. So what you want is, you want to separate these. You want to remove the rocks, put them in one area, and this will only happen when you're doing the tilling of the land. So the tilling of the land will actually help you to separate the rocks, and also to break down these rocks into small rocks, which will actually form the soils. So you're trying to disintegrate the rock itself. And also the other advantage is that the landing forming system, changing the soil, the shape of the soil surface. You know, at times you find that your land is hilly, so you're going to change the land form by at least leveling the land. By leveling the land, then the form of the land, of course, changes automatically. So by doing the tilling, you're also trying to change the landforms. Next slide. So now, of course, we know the advantages, but also what are the disadvantages of tilling your land? You know, tilling, like we said in the first picture, when you're using mechanical modification, when you've got a tractor and you're using the mud plow, you find that you might create compaction in the long run because of what you're using. So the compaction comes about, like what I showed you there, when you've got the plow, what you call the plow pan. So when you're using the plow, you create that compaction within a certain layer of the soils. So when you create that layer, it means whatever you're going to grow is going to struggle. Yeah. The other thing is that you're looking at the alteration of the soil food web. You know, because you're tilling the soil, we know these organisms are very beneficial, and we don't want to disturb them. But instead, by tilling the land, you're trying to shift the population of that particular group of soil microorganisms, because you're tilling the land and you're exposing these soils to the soil, to the sun. By doing that, you're creating very harsh environments for these soils for these organisms to thrive or to survive in. So in that particular time, you're trying to reduce the soil microorganism population within that particular soil. So when you till, the disadvantage is that you're trying to reduce the population of these microbes. Therefore, your soil might not be able to do what we call nutrient recycling, because you've already reduced and you've already killed, or you've already shifted the most beneficial microorganisms that are in there. We all know that when you're trying to till, there's a cost implication that is attached. So even when you're using a tractor, you find that you're going to purchase, and you're going to need a technical person to do the tilling of your land. So the disadvantage is that when you're tilling using these expensive equipment, you also have to incur a bit of cost because of fuel and other things. So this is one of the disadvantages of tilling the land. And also, when you till your soil, tilling also contributes to speeding up the decomposition process. What we want is, we don't want the soil to lose a lot of carbon. So when you till, then we're losing the carbon to the atmosphere. Hence, the production or the breaking down of this organic matter becomes very quick. And the more organic matter you lose in your soils, the more your soils tend to deplete in terms of when it comes to nutrient availability within them. Because when you don't have a lot of organic matter in your soils, this will lead to your soils having high temperatures and also increasing on water loss. Yeah, so this in the long run will also increase on the soil erosion. So the soil erosion will come about because you've tilled your land, and after tilling your land, you've removed the soil organic matter, because you've increased the speed of decomposition. Therefore, you lose the soil organic matter. As you lose the soil organic matter, also the soil erosion increases, so that when it rains, the impact of the rains will actually wash away the topsoil that we really need, because the topsoil carries so much nutrients. So the topsoil is washed away because we don't have the guard, which is actually the soil organic matter at that particular time. Next page. So we know, we've talked of the advantages and disadvantages of tillage systems. So now we're going to look at the types of tillage systems that we have. And the tillage systems that we have, we've got what we call conservation tillage and conventional tillage. So conservation, from the word, from what we're coming from, we're saying we're trying to conserve this particular land form for future use, by also making sure that we maintain or we increase on our production. So first and foremost, we're going to discuss the conventional tillage, conservation tillage, which is actually any type of plowing seeding method that covers 30% or more of the soil and crop residues after planting to reduce soil erosion. So this particular tillage, we're saying we are tilling the soil, but we have to also take into account that the crop residues, whatever we find in the crop, it being the maize stovers, we have to at least leave them within that area so that we reduce on the soil erosion when it rains. Or after planting, we'll make sure that the crop residues still remain in the soil. We don't want a field to be like in a house where it's very clean. We want a field to be able to have these crop residues, because remember, these crop residues will act as organic manure or fertilizer in the long run as they try to decompose. So under conservation tillage, we've got tillage systems that we're going to discuss below. So these tillage systems are going to have the pictures. I hope the pictures are going to be visible to everyone. Yeah. So we've got what we call strip tillage. So we're saying when you're dealing with strip tillage, when you select to have strip tillage within your farm block, we're saying between your crop, in between the crop residues that you've had, we need to have a crop, because we don't want the crop to be near to the crop residues, because once it is near to the crop residues, in most cases you find that the residues will have that cold environment. So the cold environment is going to slow the seed germination process. So we want the soil to, we want the seed to be able to be exposed to the light, so that it gets the light, it gets the warmth, so that germination is faster. And the reason why we're having, as you can see, we have in the sides we've got the crop residues, and in between it's bare. So while it's bare, we're trying to put the seed there, we're trying to plant there, so that when it rains, the crop residues here we're going to conserve the moisture that the plant will need, because the root system is going to be diverse for as long as there is no hard pan or the plow pan that we talked about. So by having that, by having those residues, we're also promoting water conservation, and also we're reducing on erosion of the soils. So when it rains, we're conserving the water, and in the long run also trying to maintain or regulate the temperatures below the soils. Next slide. So we talked of the strip. So the strips, we've said the residues are put, the plant is planted between the crop residues, but then we're going to talk about also the zero tillage. I know zero tillage has brought a lot of confusion, but I've seen a lot of people practicing it. It's where you've got a field. Let's say, for instance, if you planted maize last year, you don't have to go in until the soils, but then you can just, I've seen people going in with what we call a dibble stick, any stick, you're just making planting station. So in this particular time, they call it tillage, zero tillage, but then you're just disturbing the soil using a stick where you're going to put your seed. You're not going to reap, you're not going to do anything, but you're just using a dibble stick where you want to sow your seed just, and the rest of the area remains with a lot of crop residues, and it remains with the previous crop in it. So they're saying the soil is not disturbed by plowing throughout the year. Crop is sown direct into the soil and not tilled since the harvest of the previous crop. So we've got the previous crop, and you want to go in with beans. So you're going with beans because, remember I was saying it's conservation agriculture, and this is under conservation, this is conservation tillage. Remember, maize is a heavy feeder. So at this particular time, because you've got a crop that was planted in a year, now you want to go in, you're going in with a different crop, which is a legume, because a lot of nutrients have been mined by this maize for it just to form that cob. So in this particular time, you're going in with a legume, which is going to replenish the depleted nutrients that the plant had used, the previous plant that had used. So you're not disturbing fully. So in this particular time, you're also trying to practice conservation agriculture, because we're saying conservation agriculture is going to work when you will abide these three principles: minimum soil disturbance, which we've done there, and crop rotation with at least 30% legume. So we've gone in with a legume there, and we're saying we want to have permanent soil cover, and as you can see in the picture there, we have residues still remaining within the field. So still talking about conservation agriculture, and this is a tillage system, how you can till your land when you want to practice this particular conservation agriculture. Next slide. So the other one is ridge tillage. You know, ridging is made in areas where you want to conserve water, and or also in areas where you know that the field experiences what we call waterlogging, where the water does not really go down the soil profile. So what we want is, we don't want the seeds to start rotting, but the only way we can go about it, because that's the only, for instance, if that's the only farm you have, if your soils at that particular farm are poor in terms of, when we talk of drainage, that does not mean that you cannot do your agricultural enterprise. You can still do it, but you select a tillage system that is suitable for that particular land form. So in this particular case, we're talking of the ridge system. I think most of us will know the ridges. This was being practiced by our parents, and I know others are still practicing this. So what you're trying to do is, you're trying to make a raised bed so that when it rains, the water is conserved within the bed, and it goes down so smoothly. You don't want the water to stay or to be within the field for a long time, because when that happens, the seeds in most cases might start rotting, or diseases might come into your field. So you're raising you're selecting this because, you know, one, my soils are poor in terms of water infiltration. So you're trying to raise so that the water does not affect the seeds that you, the plants that you've planted. And also, by doing that, you're also not burning the crop residues that are in the field. You're letting them there, so that even as the water drains, because the drainage system is very slow, even as it drains, especially for people that have got clay soils, you know, clay, the drainage system is very slow. So you find that when it rains consistently, the water will be all over. So as the crop, or any crop, if any crop experiences prolonged water logging, they start wilting, or they'll start rotting, and they'll start having diseases. I've seen a lot of this happening, especially when you plant your avocado in dumbos. You find that they will just start wilting. They will just dry. Then you'll be like, why are they drying? It's because the avocados do not tolerate a lot of water. So you need to have a soil that is proper for avocado production. Sure. So this is one of the tillage systems that we have under conservation tillage. So we've seen it's a raised bed. We can still use that for as long as you know the type of soil that you have, and you also know why you want to select that type of tillage system. Next slide. Yeah, we also have under conservation. It depends on what you want to achieve at the end of the day. So we've got what we call mulch tillage. So this mulch tillage, you find that if you've got a lot of crop residues within your farm, you're trying to incorporate other crop residues beneath the soil or subsoil surface, and you leave others on top. You're doing that because, you know, decomposition of crop residues is faster when they are incorporated in the soils. Excuse me. They're incorporated in the soils, so these will contribute or will give the microorganisms that are within that particular soil the carbon that they need. You know, the carbon that they will get, of course, will be used to do other works within the soils. And also you leave part of the crop residues on top of your land. You're doing that because you don't want your land to be losing a lot of water. So by doing that, you are encouraging, or you're enhancing water storage, reducing on evaporation. So the water loss at that particular time is not going to be much. So the crop residue is left on the surface and subsurface So the surface will have the residues, and beneath there will be residues. Therefore, this particular tillage is going to be useful in areas where you want to promote, of course, you want to loosen your soils, especially in areas where your soils are very hard or they are very compact. So by doing that, you incorporate the residues within the soils, and the soils are going to be loose, so that when you plant anything, the roots will be able to penetrate nicely, and they will be able to go beyond the 20 centimeter depth, so that they're able to mine the nutrients that are below the 20 centimeters depth. Next slide. Sorry, I've already talked about this one. Next slide. Okay, so in summary, on conservation in tillage, we said not tillage. We already talked about not tillage. I'm just trying to summarize, which is soil undisturbed with no primary or secondary tillage, direct into the soil, uniform layer of residues on the surface. So now the advantages of no tillage, we're trying to reduce the erosion, like we said, because the residues of the previous crop is going to be there. So even when it rains, the impact of the rain is reduced by these tillage. It's like you've got an umbrella and it's raining. So when it rains, the energy the rains will come with will be reduced by the umbrella. So as it goes down, you find that it will be dropping very slow. The residues that are there also will increase on water infiltration. You know, the infiltration process is a bit slow. So what happens is that if you've got your land that has got no crop residues, the rains, when the rains come, they will just go. When it rains, the water that comes, it will just go. So, but then if you've got the crop residues, when it rains, there's no erosion, so the water will be going into the soil slowly, and they will take the time will be able to help you have enough water in your fields or in your planting basins. Whatever you've planted, you still have enough water because there is an increase in water infiltration. Maybe the only disadvantage is that with this no tillage, you're going to require more nitrogen, because the nitrogen is very volatile, especially when you don't, because in this particular time, you've got the microbes. The microbes are going to be needing a lot of nitrogen within the soil system. So since you've not tilled the land, these organisms within the soils, they'll use up the nitrogen that is already there, and you will need to supplement the nitrogen. So this is why the requirement is very high when you're using no tillage. You need to put a lot of fertilizer so that the other nitrogen goes to the plant, the other nitrogen goes to the microbes. You know, remember, we're looking at sustainable agriculture, and by sustaining, we're trying to say we need to support the lives of these other microorganisms. We need to have a proper ecosystem. We need to have microorganisms thrive within that particular farm. The other one is the strip tillage. The top, we've talked about it, but the advantage of it, of course, it minimizes soil moisture loss, like we said, because you've planted in strips. You've seen there in the picture, we're seeing the crop residues, and the plant is in between. So you find that when it rains, where the crop residues are, you're going to have moisture. And when you look at the roots there, they're going in all directions. And what does that mean? It means the roots will be able to take advantage of the moisture that is conserved within those areas, and the plant will keep on growing nicely. And also the advantage that it preserves crop residue on the soil surface, because we know that we've not removed, or we've not bent the crop residues. So the crop residues will be preserved. So the only concentration is where are we going to put the crop. So the crop residues are there, and we're only concentrating on where we're going to plant. So in other words, it preserves the crop residues on the soil surface. Maybe the only disadvantage is that you need to have a proper implement that will help you to nicely have a proper width of what you want to plant. You remember, every plant has got the planting, of course, the planting depth, and also the plantings, the spacing of the plant. So depending on what you want to grow, you need to use an implement that will be able to fit within that crop that you want to grow in your farm. If you want your field, or if you want your planting station to be 20 centimeters apart from the crop residue, meaning you have to look for that particular implement. But then it's very difficult, and because of various implements that are made. So it's a preference, so meaning that you have to just tell the manufacturers to actually have to make that kind of implements for you. So this is the only disadvantage, that planters' widths must match the widths of the tillage equipment. So depending on what you want to grow, what you decide on your farm, then you also have to look at what is the spacing. Where am I going to find this planter? Because planters are different, and people have got different preferences when it comes to planting. So this does not tell us that you have to select what suits you, what you can afford and what you can manage when it comes to these conservation tillages. So the other tillage is the ridge tillage, one we've talked about. Of course, we've said that it reduces erosion. Yes, water infiltration, we've already talked about it, because we still have the crop residues within there. The only disadvantage is that ridges require maintenance. We all know that when you make ridges, after some time, you have to what we call ridging. You need to take again back the soils. So now that is another work that you need to do, because if you don't, in most cases, when you've got heavy rains, you find that the roots will get exposed to the sun, because the water, the soil is being washed away. So when you ridge, you also have to go back and redo the ridging process. And it's laborious, it's labor intensive, we know that, because you've already done part of the ridging. Again, after some time, you need to go back and employ people, and they start doing the same things again. Next slide. So we said we've got two types of tillage systems. We said conservation tillage system, which we've talked of, and the types that you can employ at your farm. And the last one is conventional tillage system. Conventional, it's very common, especially when it comes to small-scale farmers. Remember, like what we said, farming can be done by anyone, but what you do has got repercussion in the long run. So what kind of tillage are you using? This will tell you, or actually make you to be a very good farmer or to be a very bad farmer. By selecting a tillage system, if you go for conventional tillage, which is actually the main aim is to recover and move the deepest layer of the soil. In this particular tillage system, we're using mechanized instruments. So you're going to the deepest layer. And remember, the more you go to the deepest layer, the more you
We can't hear you, Mr.
destroy the
Kalunga.
ecosystem of these particular organisms. Are very useful. Are you getting me?
Oh, now you've come back. If you could please repeat the last sentence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm saying what we want is, we want our soils to be complete. A healthy soil should be able to accommodate various microorganisms. Therefore, when you go by conventional tillage, then you're tilling your soils very deep. You're going to the deepest layers. So if there are any organisms that are within those deepest layers, you find that their lives or their production cycle is going to be disturbed. So that particular soil will be a dead soil at the end of the day, meaning that whatever you're going to be incorporating, whatever you're going to be putting in, certain things will not be broken down to useful forms that the plant might need at the end of the day. So conservation tillage, we're saying cement tillage, recover and move the deepest layer of the soil, incorporation and destruction of plant residues. So trying to incorporate and distract the plant residues, we're also trying to expose terrestrial insects to sunlight to control them. You know, we're saying an healthy soil will have a lot of organisms within them. Like when you go on a dumping site, you find that when you try and go a little bit down, you'll find a lot of worms and other organisms. That actually tells you that the soil is very nutritious, that's got a lot of nutrients, and it's very healthy. So this is why our parents in the past, they would go there and plant like a lot of vegetables, and they will not put any fertilizer there. It's because then the microbes that are there, they are helping to make that particular soil very fertile. So by selecting conventional tillage, because we've exposed the terrestrial insect to sunlight, then you've already killed these microorganisms. So meaning that as you put other fertilizers that you want to put, there are certain fertilizers that will work well when they're broken down to a certain level from organic form to inorganic. But without that, without the microorganisms, that might not work. It will take a longer period. And you find that by the time the plant will need certain nutrients, like for instance, nitrogen, if the microbes that were necessary to break down this organic nitrogen into organic, because the plants will take up nutrients in organic form. So you find that by the time the nitrogen is being released, the plant would have already passed that stage where it really needed the nitrogen. Therefore, it will keep on struggling as it goes. The yield that you're going to get at every day is going to be affected. So under this conventional tillage, we have what we call primary tillage. You know, the primary tillage, we're using the mound board. The mound board is an equipment that is used to break down the soil or to loosen the soil, to go deep down the soil. So you use this, you go as far as 15 to 90 centimeters down. This simply means that your soils are going to be exposed, and the process of decomposition is going to be very high. Like we said, when you till your soils, you're also increasing on the decomposition process. By increasing on the decomposition process, you're saying the carbon that the plants will need, or the organisms will need in the long run, will not be there, because it will go into the atmosphere. So this particular tillage system, you're going to use the mob disc. The disc, you're going to break down the big clouds, those big soils, to cut them in between. The chisel, like the way we use, I've seen people that do buildings, they're using a chisel because they're using that to break down very hard soils and subsoil layers, you know. So by selecting that particular tillage, you're going to use such implements, and the impact is that when you go by conventional tillage, you're going to destroy your soil, and you're going to incur a lot of cost by using these implements. So all these things about preference, depending on the amount of money that you have as an individual, but we have to bear in mind that the best we want is to conserve our small farms so that they are more productive. You're better off having a small farm which is more productive than a big farm which is dead, because whatever practices you're trying to employ, they are not yielding anything. Next slide. So the secondary tillage, you know, because the first one, primary, you've used all these implements that are going to tend the soils up to 90 centimeters layer. So now you're going to come in with other implements that will improve the seedbed. So these soils have been turned, but then you want to make seedbeds. So you're going to use secondary tillage. You're going to use implements that are going to be used in the primary, which are like cutters. So you're trying to make seedbeds using other implements in the secondary, because when you till in the primary, at that particular time, you're just disturbing the soil. And we're saying, if you want to practice sustainable agriculture or conservation agriculture, we need to disturb the soil in a minimum way. By going up to 90 centimeters layer, we're not disturbing the soil in minimum way. So now, since you've already disturbed the soils massively in a maximum way, you need to go in with other implements that will make seedbeds. So this picture that you're saying, it actually helps in improve the seedbed by increased soil pulverization to conserve moisture through destruction of weeds and to cut up crop residues. So this one has got different implements that will help in breaking down those small soils so that the seedbeds are formed, and also destruction of weeds. Of course, they'll be cutting off the weeds. So as they're cutting off the weeds, they are helping in reducing the weed infestation and to cut up the crop residues. So the crop residues are cut in very small pieces. So when they are cut in very small pieces, you find that they will not be able to cover the soils. If we get back to the three principles we talked about, we're saying if we're going to practice conservation agriculture, we're going to need at least permanent soil cover. But remember, in this conventional tillage, farmers don't care about leaving the soil covered. All they are interested in is the profits. But machinery there is expensive, and just going by this method becomes even more expensive. Next slide. So we've talked about the tillage system, which is falling under minimum soil disturbance. So we're saying, depending on what you want to achieve, it's your core and it's your preference. But looking at where we're coming from and where we're going, our prayer is each and everyone who's got a farm should at least try as much as possible to practice conservation agriculture, because this is the only way we're going to help in mitigating environmental degradation issues. So remember there we talked of having the permanent soil cover, which I would want to relate to as mulching. This is any material that covers the soil surface. For as long as you've got the material that will be able to cover the soil surface, meaning that you're at least on your way of practicing conservation agriculture. So what can we use as mulch? We're saying any material that covers the soil surface. We want our soil surface to be covered. We're covering this because, one, we don't want the erosion to start taking place within our farms. When the top soil is eroded, it creates more. Remember, the top soil has the best level of nutrients. So when it is washed away, it is deposited in a certain area. Then you have to work. It's a lot of work for you to start again. Soil formation is a process. So if that happens, then you have to wait a little bit, or to start working on your farm, so that you have that the other layer which is there to have at least proper attention, at least by putting whatever plant debris you have, fallen leaves, compost, wood chips, and rotted manure. So what we want is, what can you use for mulching? You can use leaves, you can use debris, you can use whatever is there, what we've mentioned there, compost, you can use that, wood chips, you can use that. But I've seen other people would want to use any type of a plant. Remember, mulching, we don't want to use plants that will not be able to rot. there's this certain stage where when a plant grows, the bark becomes the lignin becomes very hard. The plant becomes very hard such that it cannot be broken down by the organism. So we want plants that are able to offer benefits even to the microorganisms that are there. So what is the benefit of this mulching? Weed suppression. You know, when you mulch your field, let's say for instance, if you had planted soybeans or maize, after harvesting, you let your maize stovers. The moment you burn, if you've already started practicing conventional agriculture, if you don't burn and you leave them in the field, you've already started practicing conservation agriculture. So what are the benefits? The benefits are that when you've got your mulch, your field is well covered. You don't have to think of weeds, because as the weeds are emerging, for them to grow fully, they need to be exposed to sunlight. But instead, when you've got your mulch, the sun is only being beneficial to the mulch that you've selected. Therefore, these seeds will not be able to receive enough light. In the long run, they'll just die. The mulching also reduces on the weed pressure. You know, weed in fields gets to be infested every year because we let the weeds set seeds. So when they set seeds, they will disperse within the farm. So even after you weed, you find that your farm is still infested with a lot of weeds. So, but how can you get rid of these weeds? Is by going or by using mulching as one of the mitigations. So mulching is going to help you to reduce the weed pressure. This does not happen in a year. It's something that, you know, farming, you have to work on it. It's a process. Everything is a process. There are processes that we don't have to get rid. It's a process, there are cycles, and so we cannot rush things. So we have to be very patient in terms of weed suppression, and also to make sure that we choose the right mulching. You know, mulching also reduces on evaporation because we have our soils covered. So even when it is very hot, we've got intense sunlight. The sunlight intensity is going to be reduced by the mulch that you have. By doing that, the water loss is reduced also. There are farms where if you've got an avocado plantation, then you go in and plant velvet beans. It's going to cover the area and you don't have to go in and start weeding. So what is happening is that this velvet beans is going to act as a mulch. It's a beans and it covers the soil so well. So now it's covering where there are no plants, you know, because we already have the planting stations. We're not planting this inside the planting station where the avocados are planted, but where the soil is bare. So you're doing that so that when it rains, when the rains go, at least for some time, the moisture will still be there. And also this velvet beans is going to be helping, because you've chosen this velvet as your mulch, it's going to be helping in fixing the nitrogen, the atmospheric nitrogen back in the soils. And this nitrogen, again, is going to be used up by the plant. So it's how you select your mulching mulching seed. If you say, okay, I'm going to use this, it's your call, depending on what you want to achieve. So we're saying mulching also regulates soil temperatures. How? When it's very cold, it's going to when it's very hot, the intensity of heat is just going to be closer to the mulch. But within the soil ecosystem, the soil climate there, you find that the soils are still cold. You find that in certain areas where, if you visit a farm and you find that there is no mulch, the moment you just plow, if you get to touch the soil, you find that the soil is very hot, meaning that the temperatures, the heat that we're feeling is also going into the soil. If that heat enters the soil, it means that whatever is in the soil will start dying because the conditions at that particular time, they are very harsh. So the mulching is going to help us at least regulate the temperatures. so that whatever processes that are taking place continues and everything gets to be positive in the long run. Also, mulching helps us in protecting the bare soil. If a soil is like, what I would give an example, like a house, because one house is to be clean. You find that when it rains, the water easily washes away the topsoil and it brings about compaction. You know, when the rain comes with intensity, as it hits the soil, all the nutrients that are within the top layer will be pushed down to layers where the roots will not be able to reach. This is why when you hear of the regions that we have in Zambia, when you talk of the northern region, Muchinga province, northern province, there the soils are very acidic because most of the farmers, they like practicing conventional agriculture where they don't care about the well-being of the soil. They will just till and plant. So you find that because they don't practice mulching, when it rains, all the rain's intensity is just coming direct onto the soil. So it's like it's pushing the nutrients. It's moving the nutrients from one layer to the other, one layer to the other. So in the long run, the nutrients are pushed at a layer where when they plant maize is a shallow rooted crop. So when they plant maize, the maize roots will not be able to tap the needed nutrients. That's why you always hear people cry, no, my yields are bad, my yields, maybe someone has bewitched my field and all that. It's because when you talk of mulching, they think it's a waste of time, not realizing that the mulching, for as long as they've chose the right material for mulching, it helps them at least realize a few bags of maize, unlike just keep unlike complaining all the time. So these are the benefits of mulching. If we want to mulch, we have to look at what type of material do I want to use. There are mulching seeds that you can use. There are mulching, you can use fallen leaves, you can use anything that we have in the farm. So as you're trying to select that, you also need to make sure that, oh, when I do this, these are the benefits that I'm going to get at the end of the day. Next slide. Yes, so now, too much of everything is bad, like we've said. The best is when you're mulching. I've seen people mulching without knowledge. Anyone can mulch, but how much do you have to put? How should you put it also matters. So you need to leave a breather. You cannot just mulch the entire crop, like you cover the entire crop. You need to leave at least a room where the water and oxygen can reach, because if you over mulch, you might suffocate the plant. So the amount of mulching also really matters. So mulching near the stems, you find that when you mulch closer to the plant, the mulches are even holding the plant. You have problems when the time you're going to have drought, or if you don't water a lot, the insects will start attacking the plant, because the plant at that particular time the roots will have a bit of water. The plant will always have water that it will reserve in the system. So because there's no water at that particular time, and you've put your mulch closer to the plant, so all the insects that are within that mulch, they will start now attacking the plant. Hence, the plant will start wilting, will start drying up. So putting mulching near the stems is not advisable, because you introduce more of the pests and other things. Also, mulching can contribute to the rotting of the bark. The plant, you find that this is why I always encourage people to paint when the plants are growing, you paint the back of the plant so that you don't introduce the termites there. So because you've taken your mulching, you've put in your field, and you've put them closer to the back of the plant, you find that the insects, or rather the ants, will start building within that plant. And as they are building that, the back of the plant will start now allowing a lot of disease to go into the plant. You find that in the long run, you've got a very good plant. The plant started well because you overmulched, and the plant now system is infected with a lot of diseases because the insects and the ants had created room for them to, the disease for them to enter. The plant will grow, and the fruit quality is going to compromise. You find that when the plant starts setting fruits, all the fruits, you find that they're rotten or they're having some deformities. Just know that it's because of how you mulched in the beginning. So the impact is going to be in the long run, because you will not change that because the entire plant is diseased. So mulching, if you do a lot of mulching, the mulching also steal a bit of nitrogen from the soil. So you need to make sure that when you mulch, you don't overmulch you don't overmulch and put everything closer to the plant, but at least you leave space so that the nitrogen cycle and process is continuous. Next stage. Yeah. So when you look at that picture, there is mulching. When you look at that first picture, someone has mulched, and they're very happy that no, this is the best way of mulching. They've mulched closer to the citrus plant, and when you look very closely, you find that the disease infestation will start from there, and it will start going up until to the leaves, not until to the fruits. So the fruits will start dropping. In the other pictures, you've seen people are thinking, no, this is the best for as long as I've got a lot of mulch in my field, I can overmulch. Overmulching is not right because, like we've said, it brings about a lot of diseases. It makes you lose a lot of nitrogen within the soils. And we know that nitrogen is very essential throughout the plant growth. We still need it because it promotes a lot of processes, and that we have to make sure that we do the proper mulching of the plant, depending on what you want to mulch with. So you mulch properly, and you make sure that you observe if there are any plants that are, any branches that are touching the mulch, you trim them. You train, a plant, when a plant is growing, you need to train it in a certain way. So we find that when you've got a plantation of anything, if you don't train your plants as they are growing, even harvesting gives you problems. So disease transferring can start from the mulching, bad mulching. So if you don't properly mulch, if you overmulch your fields, and these branches are touching the mulch, and then the transferring of disease will start from there. The problem will start from there and up to the plant, up to the entire plant. Then would have wasted a lot of time and energy and money at the same time, Next slide. So how do we mulch? This is the type of mulching we want. We want a plant to have a breather. We want, when we mulch, at least there should be room. We are mulching because we want the water conservation to be adequate, to be best, so that when we do the irrigation, or if we don't have an irrigation system at our farms, when we water, at least we are guaranteed to say in the next 3-4 days, the water, the amount of water, the amount of moisture is going to be sufficient for the plant. So you do the proper mulching so that the air circulation, the oxygen, everything is proper. So like we've seen the picture, someone has mulched and at least they've left a bit of space. We don't want the plant, like we've said, to be overmulched, because we want it to be properly breathing and also to reduce on diseases. As you can see, these plants look like they've been trained. The plant is growing nicely and in a certain shape, like an umbrella. That's what we want, so that even when we're harvesting, it becomes easy. Unlike the branches are everywhere and everything. So this this is something that you can do when the plants are just, when they begin to grow. When they're growing, you're training them, you're removing certain branches, because when they grow older, it becomes a bit tedious and tricky to start pruning and training. So the training begins when the plants are small. So that's why we call it training, so that they maintain a certain shape. Unlike when they are old, it becomes very difficult. Next slide. Thank you. So remember, from the 3 principles we had mentioned, the minimum tillage, we've talked about the tillage systems, what types of tillage we have. We've talked of conservation tillage and conventional tillage. So now, in the other part, on one of the principles, we talked of having a permanent soil cover and also crop rotation. So now, cover crops, what are they? Remember, we want to cover the field so that the soil is protected. Seeding is protected. Soil improvement between periods of normal and crop production. So we're trying to have these cover crops. Cover crops are a preference depending on what you want to do, on what you want to grow. Not every cover crop can work anywhere. So most cover crops are grasses, legumes, brassicas, or mixture and safe to protect. So depending on what you want to achieve, if you are in a plantation, you need to choose a cover crop that will give you the best benefits depending on what you want to achieve. Am I going to use grass? Why are you using grass? Remember, we're saying when we're at the farm and we're doing conservation agriculture, if you choose grass, then you are saying my animals that I'm keeping will also benefit from this grass. If you're choosing legumes, you're saying whatever I've planted, I want it to benefit from the nitrogen that the legumes will be fixing in the soil. So depending on what you want, depending on what you're doing, you need to look at the cover crop and its benefits it has. So we're saying most cover crops are grasses, legumes, brassicas, and a mixture and safe to protect bare soil whilst improving soil physical, chemical, and biological properties. So when we talk of this improving the soil physical, is the soil very compact? If it's compact, if I use this cover crop, how is it going to help me improve the compactability of this? So the other cover crops are going to loosen the soils. Remember, we want a very loose soil so that there is proper air circulation, there is proper nutrient recycling, there is proper water infiltration. So now, how is this cover crop going to help me in terms of chemical? Remember, a cover crop, different cover crops have got different functions. Others will help in replenishing the nutrients that are depleted in the soil, like returning back the soil fertility by incorporating the nitrogen or by fixing the nitrogen that has been used up by other crops. As you can see in this picture, the maize is planted and we've got velvet beans there. So what is happening there is that the weeds are being suppressed. The maize is mining whatever nutrients that are in the soils. But again, this same cover crop is also fixing back. It's like you're using and someone is returning. So it is working in a lot of ways. So biological properties, because this cover crop creates that cool environment down there beneath the soils, even the microorganisms that are there, the processes will be proper. Everything will be perfect. Others will be fixing nitrogen. Others will be breaking down the nutrients. Others will be making sure that the organic matter that is there is broken down and given back to the plant as nutrients, and so on and so forth. So depending on what you want to choose and what you're doing, you have to choose the correct cover crop that will help you improve your farm block. So We're going to look at the importance of cover crops in the next slide. So we're saying, if you've got a cover crop, what are you going to get at the end of the day? If you've got a farm and you say, okay, I'm going to introduce cover crops in my field or in my farm, what are you going to benefit? One, like Carl was saying, depending on what you've selected, the cover crops are going to improve the soil structure. What does this mean? It means if you've got soils, there are soils that are very block, very compact. So they are going to reduce the compacted soils are going to be reduced by introducing this cover crop. It's going to, the roots of this cover crop are going to be diverse. They're going to be breaking that compaction. They're going to be loosening the soils. Remember, we've got the cover crops like in the top picture that we're seeing. The erosion is going to be reduced because when it rains or when the wind comes, the soil is not going to be washed away because the impact of the rains, like we discussed earlier, is going to be reduced. Of course, we've seen that as the maize leaves are falling, or as the leaves of the selected cover crop keeps to dry, as they are drying, they're also increasing the organic matter content within it because they are dropping on the soils. So the organic matter is also increasing because this cover crop you've selected, when it sheds off leaves, the leaves are going direct on the soil, and the soil's organic matter keeps on improving. And when the soil organic matter keeps on improving, we're saying even the nutrient availability within your soils keeps on improving, keeps on going high. So the other benefit is improved nutrient recycling. You know, nutrient recycling, like we said, the recycling will only happen when you've got a healthy soil. And we're saying a healthy soil should be at least less compacted, should be able to have a very good climate within it, what we call microclimate. So microclimate, meaning that within that soil microclimate, we've got a lot of organisms that will help in breaking down very hard, very big materials into small that the plant will be able to use up. So there's improved nutrient cycling. So when you use that, when you use the selected cover crop, you're assured that there will be that nutrient recycling with suppression, like we discussed earlier. When you've selected the proper cover crop, the weeds that are coming up, they will not have chance to meet the sunlight, but instead there will be competition. They would want, but they will not, because the land is already covered. Hence, due to provision of sunlight, they will start dying just within them. Then also, this is going to reduce the weed infestation, like I said earlier, because you're not allowing the weeds to set seed. So because the weeds are not even growing, of course, at this particular time, you're reducing on the labor for weeding. So the cover crop is helping you by at least reducing the weed suppression. Other cover crops who act as pollinators or beneficial insects, will bring in other insects that will be able to reduce the insects that are going to be bringing diseases within the farm block. So depending on what you've selected, you have to also to look into account. There are a lot of cover crops on the market. There are a lot of cover crops there. So it just depends on what you want to achieve. We know that cover crops are going to also improve the water infiltration. How are they going to improve this? You know, we're saying when it's raining, the water is slowly percolating down the soil. Like nothing is rushing the water. The water is coming in slowly. Then the water infiltration is going to be. So the meaning that the water will go to all the layers of the soils. And that's what we want. So that when the plant is growing, it's able to tap, because the root system of the plant is going to be diverse down the soil. So wherever it taps, at least should be, the soil should be able to have enough moisture. So this cover crop also is going to improve the moisture content or storage, because the evaporation is going to be reduced. Of course, it's also going to increase the soil aeration. Remember, aeration is going to improve because the cover crop that you've used is going to have a network of roots. So the roots will penetrate within the soils. So where the water will be passing, also the air circulation is going to be proper. If the plants are put in an area where there is no air circulation, they will start to rot, or they will have what we call root rot. The roots will just start rotting. So when you uproot a plant, you'll find that it's going to be reddish down there. Just know that it's either the water is not well infiltrating, or there's water logging, and also the air is not circulating. So if these things are not in proper ways, it means that the plant, whatever you're going to plant, will start having difficulties in growing. Of course, disease suppression. Disease suppression will come about because when you've introduced a cover crop, certain diseases will not be able to thrive under certain cover crops, because certain cover crops are others have got a chemical scent that pushes away insects, and that will not bring about disease, because diseases will come about because, one, there are insects that are infiltrating your field or that are infesting your field. But because you've chose a proper cover crop that is giving out a very sensitive smell, you find that most insects will be repelled, will not be able to visit that particular field. So it depends on what you want to choose and how you want to do it. So cover crops are beneficial in such a way. Next slide. So how do you select a cover crop? I know people who have different interests and they would want to try different things on their farm block. It doesn't matter how much land you have. We're saying our prayer is we have to remain sustainable. We have to make sure that the lands are looked after, so that even our kids can come back and say, oh, this farm was bought in 2000 and it's still thriving because you've taken care of the farm nicely, and within your area, you're trying to promote what we're calling sustainable agriculture. So now, when selecting a cover crop, what do you need to do? You need to identify the purpose and objective for its use. Why do I want this cover crop? What is it going to give me at the end of the day? As the farm manager, as the owner of the farm, you need to answer those questions. We're saying there are a lot of cover crops that are there apparently. So when choosing a cover crop, you need to ask yourself such questions. What cover crop, what benefit is this going to give me? What type of cover crop am I going to choose? When you do that, then you know. So you're going to ask yourself, is this cover crop I'm selecting, what do I want? Do I want to improve my soils? If you want to improve your soils, you need a cover crop that is going to be replenishing or putting back some nutrients that other crops are mining. So you're going to say, okay, for me, I'm going to choose a cover crop that is going to be helping me replenish the depleted nutrients. Okay, what type of cover crop is that? Then you look at the cover crop that are available and how much they can fix in. So for instance, you say, okay, I want a cover crop. Since avocado needs a lot of nitrogen, okay, I'm going to use a cover crop. Velvet beans, at least velvet beans has got the ability to fix a lot of nitrogen, even as this plant gets to mine a lot of nitrogen from the soils. So you say, okay, I think this is going to be beneficial. And by doing that, it's going to help me control the erosion, because it's going to cover the fields. Insects and diseases, you're going to say, okay, I want a cover crop that is going to be suppressing the weeds, that is going to suppress the disease and insects in the field. So you choose a cover crop that has such characteristics. You want a cover crop that has got the ability to fix nitrogen. So you're going to say, okay, the problem my farmer has is this, and what am I going to do? I will need a cover crop that has got to help me work on the problem that my farm has. Oh yeah, after doing a soil test, I realized that my farm nitrogen levels are very low. So now, because I don't want to be using a lot of fertilizer all the time, what can I do? Because by using a cover crop, you're trying to go in a sustainable way. By extensively using chemicals, you're not going in a sustainable way, because in the long run, these fertilizers that we use, they also contribute to destroying the soils. Remember, when you get to use fertilizers all the time and you're not going the organic way, you realize that your farm, for as long as you've not put any fertilizer, they will never thrive. So you have to be using fertilizers at a minimal rate, but also by bringing in the other sustainable ways of trying to mitigate the nutrient deficiency program within your soils. So you want to have a cover crop that is going to do nutrient retention. There are times that you want to retain the nutrients. I've seen farms that are very depleted. For instance, they would go in and plant what we call sun hemp. I think most of you know it. So when they do plant sun hemp, sun hemp has got a lot of benefits. It's very nutritious. And especially for people that are also doing animal production within their farming units. So others would say, okay, my farm has got a problem with nutrients. So since it's a new farm, I want the nutrient retention to take place. So someone is going to go in and broadcast the sun hemp. The sun hemp will grow. When it grows, before it matures, you cut it and you incorporate it in the soils, meaning that you are trying to retain the nutrients that were mined some time back. So this also is used as a green manure. So they're saying a green manure is a manure that you incorporate before it matures. Any plant that has got beneficial aspect in terms of nutrients or elements, if you find that the plant that a green manure that you're trying to use has got a lot of nitrogen, calcium, and all that, you say, okay, I'm going to go in with this, but before it matures, you cut it, then you are trying to go a green manure way. So a green manure is any plant, before it matures, you cut it and you incorporate it back into the soil. Then you've gone the green manure way. So depending on what you want to choose as a cover crop, you also were saying we have to look at the purpose and objective of its use. Livestock grazing. Others will say, okay, I have a plantation of avocados, and I'm also keeping goats, cows, and all that. And you say, okay, so I will need at least, when I don't have money for feed, because you're trying to remain sustainable. It's not all the time that you're going to have money for seed, for feed. So since I don't have money for feed, I can still go in my plantation and at least get the leaves from the cover crops that I've planted and give them to my animals. So these will act as fodder. So the cover crop that you've chose is going to act as fodder. It's going to provide the necessary nutrients that plants might be lacking at that particular time. So it depending on what you want to achieve, you cannot, not all cover crops will have all these characteristics. So it's you as a farmer Others will have more or one, but it's you to identify or to say, okay, I think I would want my farm to have this kind of cover crop so that I attain these goals. Next slide. So we're saying most cover crops are grasses, legumes, and yeah. So you can have grass. If you have grass, road grass, animals will still feed on that. But in most cases, that becomes a weed. So in as much as you're trying to select, because you know that you've got animals, then necessarily mean that no, in my plantation I'll just go with grasses. This might be a weed. So what you want is you want something that will not give you problems. Because if your cover crop is giving you problems, then it's not the best selection that you've done at that particular time. So what you want is okay, since my soils are bare now, let me just plant grass, and this grass will be helping me in terms of supplementing, when it comes to feeding my animals. So it depends on what you choose and what you want to achieve at the end of the day. Next slide. So what kind of cover crop do you want? Of course, we want a cover crop that is fast established. We want it to be able to establish nicely. We don't want it to take long. We want the seeds that are able to germinate. We want a cover crop that will be able to cover the ground so that we get all those benefits we had talked about. High dry matter content production, especially for farmers who are practicing conservation agriculture, because you're going to have different enterprises within your farming unit. So you know that, okay, this cover crop is going to give me a proper dry matter content, and it will help me in supplementing whenever I'm going to be broke during the days of production of these animals that we have. Also, you want to have a cover crop that is deep-rooted or fibrous roots. A cover crop, if it's deep-rooted, like I said earlier, to say, if you're going to go with conventional farming or conventional tillage system, you realize that the nutrients that are in the layer of the soils where the plants are able to reach, they will be pushed down to a layer where the root system will not be able to reach. So in that particular time, you'd want to have a cover crop that will have a deep-rooted deep root system, so that it brings back those nutrients that are down there into the leaves. And when the leaves fall off, they might have provided the nutrients. So the nutrients are going to get back to that layer. So it's like they're mining. When they mine down, the nutrients come to the roots, and the roots now fall off. So meaning that when the roots fall off, the leaves fall off, the leaves are going to be on the surface of the soils. And now at that particular time, if you've planted the shallow rooted plant, you're able to get something at the end of the day. Is bend down. Cover crops, when you select one, you need to know how you're going to end their growth. How are you going to end? Are you going to use a chemical? When you just use a chemical, how long is it going to take for the cover crop to stop growing? Because you're not going to have cover crops throughout. The cover crops are going to be seasonal. If you say, okay, I'm going to have a cover crop just for one season, it will work, but at some point you will say, okay, no, I no longer want this cover crop to be in my farming plans. So you need to know how best can you get rid of that cover crop, because if you fail, then it will become a weed, which becomes a problem. So you have to read about what is the best way of ending this growth period of the cover crop that I chose. Yeah. So also look at, if you're choosing a cover crop, is it going to suppress the insects and diseases? Some cover crops are going to break the disease cycle. You know, there are certain plants that are going to be hosts when you use, there are certain cover crops that are going to be host of certain diseases when you use them in your field. So you have to look at them and say, okay, I've planted the avocado or I've planted something else. What can I use for me not to introduce diseases or insects in my field? Remember, when fruits are growing, the more insects you have, the more problems you create. So we don't want to have a cover crop that is going to bring a lot of insects in our field, because these insects will start now affecting our fruits. You know, at that particular time, you're seated, you've waited for 3-4 years. Now the house is now booming, the market is out there. People are looking for this done, and you realize that the cover crop that you had used has now brought in a lot of insects. So meaning the cost of production is going to go high, because you're going to try and maintain the insect infestation. And also, maybe if you've not realized that, you find that in the time that you'd want to now start selling the fruits, you realize that the insects have created walls within the fruit, meaning the food quality is compromised. When the food quality is compromised, means that the price at which farmers will buy will be very low. And it's you who's going to be on the loss at that particular time. So we're also saying a cover crop should be able to have easy vegetation management. A cover crop should not be a problem. If you want to trim it, it should not give you problems. If you want to go through the field, you should be able to go in and make amendments, because at times, like I was saying, if you've got a cover crop, you don't want a cover crop to start interfering with what you've grown. You don't want a cover crop to start climbing on the avocado plant. In the long run, even disturbing the flowering process. So you want a cover crop, when you go in, it's able to just provide you the benefits that you want. And also, you don't want it to start competing for nutrients. You want it at least to be helping you in replenishing the nutrients that the plant is taking up. Because we know that during fruiting, a plant will need a lot of nutrients at that particular time, because a lot of processes will be happening and all that. So you don't want a cover crop that will be competing with your plant. Your interest is making sure that your farm remains sustainable. Even as you produce this, you don't want your farm to be more reliant on chemicals throughout. So these are the benefits that we want. Next slide. Next slide. This is Kalunga. Next slide.
I've moved the slide. Which slide did you want? Because I moved it from this one. Can you not see on your side?
No, I can't.
Which slide can you see?
I can see the same slide I was talking about.
So the last one is easy vegetation management.
Yes.
So I've clicked next, and it's come to high nitrogen fixation.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. So we're saying, when you're choosing a cover crop, you also look at the nitrogen fixation, depending on what you want. So it's your call. Of course, you need to read through and know, okay, this is what I want, and what kind of cover crop can I use? So if you're looking for cover crops that are high nitrogen fixing, then you say, okay, this is the type of cover crop I'm going to need, and what is it going to give me? And what type of cover crop? So you're going to go with clovers, veg, and peas. These ones will give you the nitrogen that you intend to have at that particular time. And also, you want a cover crop that is crop rotation, that will give you crop rotation. It's not all the cover crops that are going to be used in crop rotation, because certain cover crops, like I said, they become let's say if you select grass in your field and you don't have animals, it is just as well as saying, okay, let my field be infested with weeds. Because when this grass gets to set seed and the seed is all over your fields, it means it would have been not been the best crop rotation cover crop that you've chose. So when it comes to cover crops, you have to look at all those things and select which ones do you want, and the cover crop should be able to have these characteristics that we just mentioned. Next slide. Next slide, Mrs. Conclusion.
There must be a delay on your side because we are on the conclusion.
Yeah,
okay.
I should think so. Thank you.
Okay.
So we're saying, for us to have a healthy farm, it requires interest from the owners of the farm and the people that are working at the farm. Both people should have an input. And we're saying, for you to have a sustainable farm, it's not something that happens in a blink of an eye. No, it's gradual, because all these things, it's a learning process, it's a learning phase. As you're going, you're saying, okay, when I do this, this is what is happening and all that. It's not something that is able to happen in a fortnight or something. So it's something that you have to be very patient with. You find that there was a project that was being introduced in Zambia, by Conservation Farming Unit, CFU. Farmers were not very patient because they were thinking if they go the conservation way, the benefits will be there in 1 year. But it's something that you build up because you're coming from a process where you've been so much reliant on chemicals. And they tell you, say, no, you need to bring in the green manures, you need to bring the mulching, the minimum soil disturbance for you to start attaining this. So now, even as the soil is being worked on, as you are introducing this to the soil will start getting used to that system slowly. So at the end of the day, in no time, you realize that 2 or 3 years down the line, your farm is able to withstand what we're calling now organic farming, because you've made your system to get used to not being more much reliant on the use of chemicals. So we're saying having a health farm requires interest and participation by the owner. Sustainability is gradual. Positive results will not be seen in fortnight because everything that happens within the soil, plant, livestock, and lastly the environment, undergoes various processes. Therefore, patience is key. So we're saying, in as much as we are trying to attain the goal of being sustainable, it's something that we need to work on, and it's gradual, and we need to have the interest at hand. We need to be reading a lot. We need to be asking a lot. We need to be involving a lot of experts in this. So I've always known that, destroying an environment is easy, but now restoration process, it's quite hard. Look at how much money is being invested in just trying to do the climate change. Now, every time you're hearing about sustainable agriculture, people are putting in so much money because they know the land, the environment is degraded. So now we need to restore it. How are we going to restoring? How are we going to do restoration? The restoration is going to take place because it's going to take place because we want to help people who have very little land. Land has become so scarce. If you've got a 1 hectare, you have to make sure that you maintain that, because we're not going to find another 1 hectare from somewhere. So within just 1 hectare, you can do a lot of things by going the sustainable way. So restoration, we don't want our lands, our fields to be degraded. We want them to be healthy. We want them to remain productive, in as much as we are practicing the so-called sustainable agriculture. I think from all this, my plea is that as we do this on our farms, we have to bear in mind that it's a process. It might look tedious. People would want to have their returns so quickly, But you know, the moment you make your farm become organic, it's a plus. And there are a few people that have had their farms become more organic because they don't have the patience. The only people that have that patience, they are reaping so well. Every time you find something in the malls that the crops that have been, the fruits that have been sold organically, you know, they are very, very expensive. So going that route, it requires us to start from the sustainable way. Gradually, small piece of land, we see the changes until we go throughout our areas that we have for farming. I think this is where my presentation ends. I'm going to welcome questions, contributions, and maybe discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kalunga. We've got a lot of good questions and a lot of people are excited to hear your presentation. We have Ruben, Hannah, Lawrence, and quite a number of people who are calling from outside of Lusaka. So we've got some people in Pika as well. So we've got a variety of people coming in. Now, the first question comes from Bessa, and Bessa is asking to say, where is it now? I seem to, oh, there we go. When one speaks of crop rotation, in the case of an orchard, given that trees that will last for many years, are you speaking of crops that you'd rotate in between the orchard trees? That's for you, Mr. Kalunga.
Okay, thank you. You know, when you talk of crop rotation and you've got an orchard, in an orchard, the only thing you might do is, you know, crop rotation will involve 3 plants from different families. So if you've got a plantation of an orchard, because an orchard is going to is actually getting mining a lot of nutrients, and the nutrients that are being mined, what you want is, you don't want all the time to be putting in fertilizer. So you want to crop rotate. So you're crop rotating. In an orchard, you will not crop rotate because you're just using two crops, I would say. There's an orchard, there's an orchard and a legume. If you want to crop rotate, it's why you make a program of saying, okay, I've got a piece of land and here I'll plant maize. Here I'm going to plant soya beans. In the other field, I'm going to plant, let's say, sunflower. So, you know, these plants that I've mentioned, they are annual plants. So we're saying this crop rotation, in that particular sense, will only work with annual plants. But instead, in an orchard, you can be going in with different legumes, the ones that we've talked about, just to at least try to replenish or to introduce the cover crops that are going to help you in terms of nutrient fixation. I think that's how I can explain it. Crop rotation mostly work unless if you're going to rotate these annual plants. If you planted in field A, if you planted maize, field B, if you planted soybeans, field C, if you planted sunflower, I mean, if you planted what's this? Sunflower, sorry. Yeah. So you're saying next year, where I planted maize, you put a legume, and where you had put a legume, you put maize, and where you put maize, you put sunflower, just like that. That's the rotation I was talking about.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Now, it says, again from Bessa, she says, it sounds like you don't recommend ridge tillage. Aren't wide and raised ridges ideal for avocados to reduce risk of photophoria, root rot? How practical is it to avoid tillage on large virgin land?
Can you come again?
Yep, no problem. It says here that it sounds like you recommend ridge tillage. And then she's saying, isn't it ideal to have raised beds for avocados to avoid root rot? So she's asking, how practical is it to avoid tillage on large land?
Okay. Well, like I said earlier, that when you look at these tillage systems, it's a preference. It's what works for you or the area you are in. Like avocado, I've seen people having raised beds. You're having those raised beds because you want to conserve the water. Avocado will need water. And if you've got, like, if you had heard me saying, if you've got a soil that prevents if you've got a soil that supports waterlogging, then you have to go the ridging way so that you're able to control the water. And root rot, in most cases, will come in when you let your basin be filled with water all the time. The water is there and it's not infiltrating. This is why I was saying you've got control over the ridge than the flat, because the flat you need to drain the water, but with the ridge, raised beds, you're going to create a way where the water will move down. You'll be able to control the water and like doing it on the flat. And when it comes to, if I heard you correctly, when it comes to tillage on a large piece
Virgin
of land,
land.
virgin land, well, again, it depends on what you want to do with that land. Tilling, you can go by station tillage. If we talk of avocado, you're not going to till the entire land. You're going to just till where you want to plant. Just that's where the concentration is going to be, because by going throughout full-fledged tilling and where you're not going, for me it might be a sheer waste of resources and a sheer waste of time. So the best is we just concentrate. If it's a bare land and it's a huge piece of land, the best is you go by doing what we call working on just the planting stations, like we earlier discussed, to say the tillage systems. Like you saw the zero tillage, you concentrate just on where you're going to plant so that you don't disturb the entire land.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, Janet would like to know, can dry grass be used for mulching?
Yes, it can. It can be used.
Thank you. Do we have to process it in any way or just cut it and spread it?
No, just cut it and spread.
Okay.
The only thing that we need to bear in mind is that we don't have to put the grass that has got seed, because then you're going to have problems of weed infestation. So when you cut it, you make sure that the grass that you're cutting you don't transfer the seed from where you're getting it to your fields.
Okay, so when you say seed, it's like when it's at the top of the grass. Is that what you mean? There's a certain point. Okay.
There are times that you're cutting grass.
Yes.
And the grass is very matured and does set seed. So when you cut it and you transfer the grass into your field, the seed will start now popping out and they will start basing within the basin of the avocado. So in the long run, you find that you're trying to do mulching, but again, you've introduced another problem. Okay. So you need to make sure that you know that the grass has got no seed or something. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then from Besser again, are velvet beans the best legume for mulching or cover crop? What about the ordinary beans that we consume? Okay.
The ordinary beans, it doesn't really cover so wide. From experience. The velvet beans has got the ability to cover a large area, and also its characteristics is able to, it's got a fibrous root system, and when it's growing, it spreads. That's how it's formed. These beans that we have, the growth area is very small. So that one we can't really, unless if you really plant very close. But velvet beans, even when you plant at wide space, if you space the velvet beans, you find that it will still cover, because that's how it is. It has got that characteristics of just spreading, even when you planted at a very big distance.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that sounds good. So how much, this is Janet Shava, how much space should be left between the stem and the mulch?
How much space?
Yes. I'm assuming she's talking about the trunk, the
trunk.
Okay,
yes. Okay. 10 centimeters is okay. 10 centimeters is very okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, if the mulch is spread at the bottom, and if she means that going towards it, should there be a space around the trunk that is bare, or should the mulch reach all the way to the stem? All the way to the trunk. So would the leaves or will the mulch be okay to reach the stem? And then as long as there's a 10 centimeter stem going upwards to the leaves, that's okay. Is that okay?
No,
no, it's not. Okay.
No, it's not. Remember from the previous picture I was saying, if you put the mulch near the stem, then we're going to introduce what we call root rot. So the stem will start rotting. So before you realize, you find that if it's during the fruiting, the plant will start aborting the fruits or the flowers. So that will, yeah, sure.
I think she meant like the space here, because I can see here you've got the dark brown, and then there's a space here just underneath the trunk. Can you see that on the picture? Oh, okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. If she meant that, yes, that's okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, that's okay. Sure.
Okay. The next question from Florence, and her says, commonly seen after trimming the grass, the green grass is used as mulch. What's the best mulch material, dry grass or green grass?
Well, you want, I've seen people using both.
Okay.
The only thing is, from experience, I would recommend dry grass, because dry grass would be able to one, reduce on the water evaporation process, where the water will not be able to evaporate process. Okay, in other words, I would say the dry is the best, because you're getting the mulch, you've got your grass. So if you want to use the grass, you need to cut it, you let it dry, then you spread it within the problem with the green grass is that at times you might even transfer insects that are already attracted to the green grass. So by doing that, you might also affect your crops. So the best is you cut it and you let it dry, and then you introduce it to your field.
Thank you very much. And then we've got a comment, it's not a question, from Brian, where he says, I have been using the mowed grass to mulch the base of the trees, not realizing that this is over mulching. Thank you for the information. And then we have Bessa, who's then asked another question. Where does one find sun hemp in Zambia?
Okay, yes, sun hemp is you can find it in, I think they still have in agro shops.
Okay.
Yes, they have in agro shops.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. And then, Brian, are there specific cover crops you can discourage using because of their attraction to specific diseases or pests?
Well, there it depends on the type of crops that you want to cover, or what you've planted, because not all cover crops will work with all the crops. So it depends, unless if it's been specific. So if it's been specific, then we look at the cover crops characteristics and what it can attract. So giving a direct answer, I wouldn't, but then unless if I know the target crop, then I would say, okay, if you use this, then this might have problems.
Okay, that sounds like that's another lecture waiting for you, Mr. Kalunga.
Sure.
Okay, we've got
Yeah.
a question from Hendrina Daroba. What advice would you give to someone starting avocado farming on virgin land where you have to clear the field for the orchard?
Okay. My advice is, one, when you are clearing the field, we don't have to remove all the trees. At least we need to have windbreakers. You know, when we plant avocados in the field and you don't have trees, you find that where the avocados was being grafted, in most cases when it's windy, they get to be destroyed. So because when you've got your windbreakers, they will be able to reduce the wind that is blowing within your farmyard. So do not cut all the trees extensively, because we're saying we're promoting sustainable agriculture, so we're trying to reduce on deforestation. So at least you cut where you know that I'm going to plant, and you leave some within the edge of the plantation, so that you reduce on the wind blowing towards the plants that you're going to plant.
Okay, that's interesting. So if you're leaving tall trees on the sides, will that affect the sunlight for the actual growing avocados? Will there be a shadow, or do we leave a bigger space to allow them to have sunlight?
They should. Okay, sure. Thank you. So when you're leaving, when you're planting the windbreaks,
yes,
you need to make sure that you measure from where your plantation is starting to, you leave a bit of space, so that the plants that you're going to introduce in your field are not overshadowed by the windbreakers in terms of sunlight. So you need to leave a bit of space. Yes.
Okay. Oh, that's very useful. Yes, because we talked at the last training with Professor Rada about sunlight and the shape of pruning. So that's why that came to mind. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Is there anything else you'd like to give advice to, or would you like to talk about the services that you offer, Mr. Kalunga?
Okay, not a problem. Maybe my only plea is that in as much as we'd want to introduce sustainable agriculture in your farms, it's important that you take into account what you really need to know and what you need to do. Because in most cases, I've seen people studying conservation agriculture and they think it's a sheer waste of time because they want to reap what they sow just immediately. But it's not really the truth. It's not really like that. But the moment you work on your farm in a sustainable way, trust me, it even becomes more attractive. Like people will know to say, whatever you produce is something that has got good quality. And you know, when you've got good quality fruits, crops, vegetables, you attract a wider market. Because even when people say, want to visit your farm, because I've seen people doing inspections when someone says, no, my farm is practicing sustainable agriculture. They'll say, okay, can we have a look at your farm? By just looking at how you've set up your farm and what is happening, someone is able to tell that, okay, yes, I think this person is worth promoting and is worth appreciate, because whatever they've done is something that a lot of people have failed to do. So my plea is, let's forge this route. I think sustainable is the only way. A lot of things, a lot of problems are there when it comes to agriculture. People are getting very low yields even after investing millions of kwachas into their farms. They are losing this because we've just missed it on one aspect of not being sustainable, introducing the sustainability within our farming enterprises. And additional to that, other services that we offer at ZARI is, of course, advisory service to stakeholders, farmers that would want to venture in various farming businesses in relation to crop production. And we've got units that look at diseases extensively. We've got units that offer services when it comes to soil-related problems. We've got units that offer trainings when it comes to farming systems. Like they'll tell you how you're going to do your farming and how you can promote the technologies that you invent at your farm. Oh. We've got we've got also the horticultural section, which actually trains people on how to do the grafting, on how to take care of crops, and so on and so forth.
That sounds extensive, Mr. Kalunga.
Yes, so it's a full bouquet actually.
Yes.
We've got everyone at hand. Yeah.
Well, it looks like another yet training for you to talk about the services there so that we can know what we can use for our avocado farming. The more learning we have and the more help you're able to give us, then we'll be able to offer a value and a quality crop. Because it's true what you said about sustainability. A lot of the international markets are very keen on sustainability. So that is something that would actually bring more value to our fruit production.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to say very quickly, with the co-op will be creating a directory. Mr. Kalunga was vetted by the board. We had a meeting and where he was asked questions and he gave a presentation and was vetted. Most of our trainers are vetted and we are confident to recommend them. However, you will find that on the group chat, you do have a lot of people giving advice. Kindly be aware to ask where they're from or if they're who can recommend them. So the best would be for me to direct you to Lusaka Avocado website, which is www.lusakaavocado.com. On that website, we'll be preparing a directory that will be sharing with yourselves so that you're able to be aware of the services that we've recommended. And Mr. Kalunga was vetted by the technical committee of the Lusaka Avocado Multipurpose Cooperative. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalunga. I appreciate your time. And as usual, your presentation hasn't disappointed. And I look forward to catching you again, maybe next month.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kalunga. Good evening, everybody. And thank you for your participation and your questions. We appreciate them. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.